Good evening and welcome to the August 27th, 2009 meeting of the Radnor Township Environmental Advisory Council. We will start our agenda as we always do with review and approval of the minutes. The minutes of our last meeting held on July 23rd were circulated to the EAC members. Does anyone have any changes, corrections, comments? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Next on the agenda is announcements, and I have several to start off with. Just before I came to the meeting, I saw an email from DEP indicating that they were going to do some truck-mounted spraying treatments for mosquitoes in West Wayne area on the evening of September 1st. Evidently, some sampling has shown that some of the adult mosquitoes in that area have shown to have West Nile virus, so they're going to do some spray applications, but there is further information about that on the Radnor Township website, so you can go there, look under the news items. Next announcement is 2 upcoming household hazardous waste events for Delaware County. There's going to be one on September 19th, and then if you missed that one, another one in October on October 8th. The September 19th event will be at Covanta in Chester, and October 8th will be at Rose Tree Park in Media. They both run from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. Obviously, it's a really good opportunity to get rid of your old paints, pesticides, pool chemicals, whatever you may have accumulated, clean out the garage. And also note that on the October event, they will be taking computers, printers, faxes, and portable TVs. But if you're going to be taking any of that stuff, I would recommend that you click on the Radnor Township webpage and just check out what the guidelines are. They have some guidelines with regard to quantities and size. So,
No large screen.
No large screen, right? I don't know what you do with those. Right? It's wall art now, right? Okay. Also, I wanted to note that Radnor Township's recycling program was awarded a 2009 Waste Watcher Award by the Professional Recyclers of Pennsylvania, the Waste Industries Association of Pennsylvania, and Keystone Chapter of the Solid Waste Association of North America. And this award recognizes exemplary recycling, waste reduction, reuse, and composting for those going above and beyond the mandates of Act 101. So we want to offer our congratulations to Peggy Hagan and her team on that award. And then also there was another award recently announced, and this was for the Willows Cottage, who have been awarded, or they will be receiving their award in September, for Historic Preservation Award for Community Involvement. And this was the award that Robin suggested we co-nominate with the Radnor Historical Society, and took the lead on that. So appreciate you bringing that to our attention. And they will have the award ceremony in Harrisburg in September 17th, I think.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I would just add that in addition to the community-supported agriculture program that's part of the Willows Cottage endeavor, there is going to be an environmental center there, and it's really very exciting that Radnor is going to have an environmental center in some place that that kids can come and learn all about agriculture and sustainability and all kinds of things. So it's pretty exciting. It's I personally have had nothing to do with the project. It's been a whole lot of people who've come together that have done a really great job and saved that building, which is a quite significant historic building, from demolition. So, saved the township having to demolish it. So that was all very exciting.
Right. Fabulous.
And I would just also add that I have been down there and have been very impressed by the job they've done and by the farm and the whole layout. So I think it's been a major step in a very good direction.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
I think there's been a lot of work
A
put into
lot
a
of
lot
work
of effort.
by
Right.
a lot of people.
And if I could just touch on some work that they're proposing to do there. They have applied for a grant to the Pennsylvania DEP's Pennsylvania Conservation Works Grant to install a geothermal HVAC system to insulate the walls, I believe, with blown-in cellulose insulation, and possibly something else that I might be forgetting.
I think there's a whole range. They had an audit done and replacement of the windows and a whole bunch of energy conservation measures. And that's all federal stimulus money that passes through. So, I mean, if they're able to get it. No township money, but all from nonprofits in the state.
Great.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
One very quick announcement on September 20th. Is that a Saturday? Yeah, I think that's right.
A calendar.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Well, it's on our website, on the Darby Creek Valley Association's website. There's our annual canoe and kayak challenge, which is an event that we hold that's down at the Cusano Center at the base, at the lower end of the Darby Creek watershed. And what we do is get into kayaks and canoes and actually paddle down the rest of the creek and out into the Delaware River and up to the Governor Prince Park. And it's a wonderful way to see the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge from the water and appreciate how the lower plumbing from around here fits together with the river. So it's on our website, www.dcva.org.
And how long does that take, the whole trip? Is it
It's a couple hours.
couple hours?
Yeah. Yep.
And you have kayaks and canoes?
Yeah, you
that
can
are
rent
the-
the,
yeah,
you can
okay.
rent the canoes from the organization. We have
Okay.
a supplier that comes in.
Great.
Yep, thanks.
All right. I have another announcement of an upcoming conference. This is the annual conference of the American Planning Association Pennsylvania chapter, and they're having their conference locally here this year in Valley Forge area from October 4 to 6. And the theme this year is investing in a sustainable future. So I thought that was something that you folks might want to take a look at. It might be of interest to EAC members or planning members or others in the community, since they're really focused on sustainability. They have smart growth topics and things like that. Full disclosure, I am one of the panelists there. I'll just be talking about legal impacts of low-impact development, but there's a good range of topics, and I would encourage folks to take a look. I think if you go to www.planningpa.org, you can see the whole agenda there. Okay, very good. And then I assume that this group that just came in is Lisa Rodriguez's class. Okay, welcome. We are happy to see you here. I noted to the EAC in advance that you may be attending, and Professor Rodriguez is a professor in the undergrad in the Villanova University, teaching a class on environmental policy this semester, I think. And so we may be joined by several of her students throughout the fall, and we welcome you. We do have a public participation portion of our meeting at the end, and we encourage you to ask questions, participate, but you will need to come up to the podium because we have a television audience. They won't be able to hear you unless you speak into the microphone. Okay? All right, great, thanks. Does anybody else have any other announcements? No? Okay. Then let's move on to our work group reports and discussion. And first up is Josh with our emissions inventory.
Well, I presented to the group earlier this week a draft version of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory report for the baseline year of 2005. This draft is intended for discussion amongst the group here, the EAC, in order to fine-tune it for presentation to the public, or to the Board of Commissioners, or to anybody else besides us, really. So, how would you like to go over it today? We went over a little bit last month, where we sort of did a breeze through I've done some changes since then. Would you like me to discuss what kind of changes I made?
That would be
or-
good, and maybe just give an overview introduction so the folks that are here understand what you're talking about before we go into some of the changes.
Okay. All right, Robin, how about you give a quick intro into the process about how we got to this point, and then I can talk about the technical aspects about how we put the report together.
Okay. This is a project that we took on to join with other communities around the country that were signing on to the mayor's climate agreement back in, actually, what year was that?
2007.
Well, yeah, I guess it was 2007, that's right. The effort was to encourage communities to take on the responsibility for trying to identify and pursue energy savings and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And so our Board of Commissioners approved of Radnor signing on to the mayor's agreement, which was to reduce their emissions along this, in the same order of magnitude as the Kyoto Agreement. The township joined the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, which is a nonprofit organization that provides technical assistance to communities to do the inventorying of their emissions and develop a climate action plan and then implement it and monitor their success. What Josh is going to go into is we've conducted the inventory, did a lot of data gathering, and now we're at the point of pulling together the inventory report to present to the commissioners.
Yeah, it's perfect, thanks. And the inventory is a look at the township's greenhouse gas emissions, and what we decided to include in this report are the buildings and vehicles and utility accounts that the township has direct control over. Also, a few other buildings that the township provides some funding to, whether it be the school district or an art center or a senior center. Those buildings are also included, and also the vehicles from the school district. But what's not included in this report are the residences in the township.
And in part, the decision was to focus on the township, the things that it can control, and Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission was actually looking at a broader scope anyway, as on a parallel track to look at some of the residences.
So their inventory has been completed in a broad sense across the whole Delaware Valley. And we may or may not decide to include some of that data in this report in later stages down the road. But for right now, this simply represents the emissions of those township accounts that, like you said, we have control over, right?
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so a few changes that we've made since the last time. There was one significant error built into our data gathering, and that was related to the school district, the Radnor School District. They do not have street light accounts. All their street lighting goes through their main electric meters. So indeed, the electric usage is captured, and it's included in the buildings section of our report. So some of the school district's building use is actually lighting up the soccer fields, lighting up the parking lots or the building, the outside of buildings.
And so did you include a clarification in the building section on that?
There's no text that clarifies that, and
Okay.
it probably would be smart to do so, especially if it's deemed important or necessary to start looking at changing or retrofitting street lights or retrofitting parking lot lights that the school district might have. We might want to try to make some attempt to break that out somehow. Right now, it's not sub-metered. We could do a brief audit to find out what percentage of the school district's electric use is accounted for by the street lighting. But right now, we don't have that. So right now, like I said, all of their electric use at the school district is bunched into the building section of the school district.
Right, and I think it will be important to include an explanation of that, because as we're looking at this, we've got we've got a graph, just for the benefit of the audience. We have a graph here in the staff report of the buildings, and we see quite a significant increase, or quite a significant difference between their electricity and, say, the electricity of the township buildings. And so maybe some of that is attributable to the lights. I mean, there may be various explanations for it, but if that's one, we ought to try to include in there some explanation.
Okay, yep,
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
Do we have any estimates of what the street light
No.
component? No, that's
Of the
what
school-
we-
of the
yeah,
school?
that
None at all. I'm meeting with the Director of Operations, Leo Burnaby, on Monday, and I have several other questions I need to ask him, and certainly I can do that as during my meeting. I can find out if they have maybe an inventory of what kind of bulbs they have, or
Right.
how many fixtures they have.
even sort of an estimate, because,
Mhm.
if he doesn't have it all completely inventory, then, because if we can just see if we're in the same order of magnitude, maybe we could correct for
Mhm.
that in at least a footnote.
Yep.
So that, I think, would be good.
Have you shared with Leo a draft copy of this report yet?
No, not yet.
No? Okay.
Not yet. This was just finished, I think, yesterday.
Minutes ago.
Minutes
Hot
ago.
off the press.
Again. I just tend to let it go to the last minute.
Okay.
So that was a nice correction. I think that might be the only major error that we had found that was built into the data. There's been couple other fixes, but they're really kind of insignificant in the overall picture. One big change that we did to the report is we tried to put all the different sections on the same footing so that you could sort of compare them to each other if you wanted to. So whereas before in the vehicle section we were talking about gallons of diesel fuel and gallons of gasoline that we were using in our buses and our trucks. And then in the building section, we're talking about cubic feet of natural gas and kWh of electricity. Well, it's kind of hard to compare those two, gallons of fuel to kWh. So what we decided to do is, in each section, chart or plot the tons of carbon dioxide equivalent that the components of that section were emitting. For instance, in the buildings, we split it out between the township and the school district, and between gas, electricity, and fuel oil, and what amount of carbon dioxide equivalent that each one of those components were emitting. So you can compare, if you so choose, the carbon dioxide emissions from Radnor's electric use in their buildings to Radnor's diesel fuel that they're burning in their trash trucks. Carbon dioxide emissions.
Mhm.
So that's a nice simplification of the report. It makes it a little bit more readable, a little bit more accessible.
And also, that's the lever that we're going to be trying to manipulate in reducing, greenhouse gas emissions, is where do we have the ability to reduce the CO2 emissions? So it
Sure.
makes sense to-
As a greenhouse gas inventory report, we felt that the greenhouse gas emissions were the most important thing to chart. Now, I fully recognize that that's a simplification of the data that we have. And in fact, we have data on how much dollars we spend on the diesel fuel, how much dollars we spend on our natural gas meters. We also know how many BTUs each flow represents. And there's been a suggestion by Brenda that maybe what we do is we can stay focused on the greenhouse gas emissions of each sector, but also in each section have some more either a chart or a table or some other way of discussing the amount of energy consumed and the amount of dollars spent in each section.
Right, I think that would be helpful, in part, in direct response to the Board of Commissioners' direction with regard to this inventory. They're looking to reduce emissions, they have their eye on energy costs. So I think that if we include, the levels of energy you have in the executive summary, we've got the CO2 emitted, we've got energy, and we've got cost, to have that continue throughout. And I agree, keep the focus on the greenhouse gas emissions, but include that additional layer of information below that.
Mhm.
And I guess we talked about breaking out some additional detailed information. You had explained that you kept this with sort of the highest level of information so that we could kind of then drill down a little bit and see what other information we need.
Right.
And I think that some of the information that you have available to you based on the information you had to input into the computer system would be very helpful, like the breakout of the buildings, different buildings.
Yeah, I'll take the vehicles as an example of
Okay.
that next level of data that we might want to consider adding to this report. If take Radnor's police cars as an example. We've all seen what type of vehicles they're driving around. They're large sedans, they're SUVs. If by any chance we decided to find some way of improving the fuel efficiency of our patrol cars, like to say, well, maybe we can do some kind of a hybrid program for some of them, or downsize, or bikes, or horseback, or whatever. It would be nice to know what the existing carbon dioxide equivalent emissions are of our police fleet. And right now, you can't break that out of this information. That information is buried amongst other large sedans, other SUVs, and other pickup trucks that we have here at the township. So the Parks and Recreation pickup trucks are sandwiched into the same data slot which the police cars are in,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe some administrative vehicles are in that
Right.
same slot. So what might be interesting to do, and the ICLEI program allows you some flexibility in this matter. We can choose different ways of organizing our vehicles. Right now, I have it simply organized between the township and the school district, just two categories. And then, of course, you break out between diesel and gasoline. What we might consider doing is picking some key groups of vehicles that we are interested in discussing. For instance, our garbage trucks, our recycling trucks, that might be one group, our police vehicles. What would be a bad example would be like our fire trucks. I'm not so sure that the fire company, wants to go to hybrid trucks or anything like that. I mean, that might not be a bad idea, but you know what I'm saying?
Right.
We might want to pick out different groups and put all the police vehicles into one group
Right.
and all the school buses into another
Mhm.
group.
Right, and I think too, the purpose of this is to provide a foundation of information. And then once the emissions inventory is done, then we come up with recommendations for the action plan. So we don't
Right.
necessarily need to shake that out yet. We just need to provide enough detail in here that is not overwhelming, but then it would be a basis for us to look at it later when we're getting into the action plan development and say, okay, well, here's the police cruisers, and this is the greenhouse gas emissions from that segment. Here are the maintenance trucks and the emissions from that segment. And I noticed in the Haverford Township emissions inventory report, they indicated, I think, miles per gallon that I guess the various segments were averaging. I don't know if we have that. I don't know if the computer can calculate that, but some level of detail so that when we go to the next step, we have a starting point at least. We may not have it all figured out. We don't need all of the data in there, but just, something that helps us make some initial steps in determining, okay, what do we want to look at closer?
So are you agreeing with what I just said about in terms of breaking out different categories of vehicles and stuff? Okay.
You okay with that?
Could I ask Brenda, on the Haverford
Yeah.
study, did they, other than these seemingly sensible vehicle breakouts, did they have other breakouts in
They-
detail that we could consider?
They did. They had, now remember, their report, they hired a consultant, and I think they paid them like $30,000 to do it. They got a grant to do that.
Does that mean I get
Josh is
30,000?
Josh is doing this for us on a volunteer basis, and we really appreciate that. So, it doesn't need to have, I guess it doesn't need to have the level of detail, say that they had quite a bit of detail, but I think that there is some level of detail in here that's got information that we already have in our own that Josh has in the computer, and he can just pull it out and actually put it into our report without having to go and do further analysis or other information gathering. So, just as an example, you ask about other sections. In their section on buildings, they have each building listed. They have the greenhouse gas emissions attributable to each building. And then they actually even have a table for their school district that indicates how large the building is, when it was constructed or renovated, the number of students it has, and that may be more than we really need. Although, when I was talking to Josh earlier today, and we were talking about the relative greenhouse gas emissions from the Radnor Township buildings versus the school district, Josh noted that, the school district has much higher emissions than we do. And I said, probably because they have more buildings. In fact, no, they don't have more buildings, but they have bigger buildings. So the information on size would probably be relevant. So I'm not suggesting we should just put detail in here for the sake of putting detail, but to explain a little bit, why the information is the way it is, so that you have some sense and you don't just look at that and say, wow, look at all the emissions they have. I mean, you've got to ask the next level of questions.
Yeah, and I think
right?
that's a great idea, and maybe there are a few categories that Haverford uses that really would be helpful for us, and not only thinking in terms of the action plan, but also helping people put our numbers in context with, is that good? Is that bad? Are we doing very well? Maybe we're actually doing quite well. The recycling example, the awards we talked about tonight, that's a very good signal. But, I think it'll be helpful to decision makers to be able to have at least a partial benchmark, apples to apples. And the more we can use at least some categories that Haverford used, then maybe not on all data points, but at least on a few, we can, actually line up and say, we are more efficient, less efficient, on a few of these points.
I hear what you're saying, and I think that more detail sounds like a good idea. I just would love to see us move soon into the climate action planning phase. We're gonna zero in on some of these questions and look at, for example, I don't actually know, I don't know if we have the building square footage, but one of the points that Leo made about Radnor School District is that the building usage is very different, and so from surrounding townships, and so you're not going to get apples to apples necessarily just by looking at the numbers. And so I just want to make sure that we're putting Josh's time.
I think that's right, and we definitely don't want to just go overboard.
Yeah.
But if there are a few categories where we can make a reasonably efficient comparison, I think that will help us as we're thinking what the plan recommendations might be.
What's important to remember is that we're not necessarily trying to benchmark ourselves with other similar buildings in surrounding townships as much as we're benchmarking against ourselves.
Right.
And this is our benchmark report, in that this is already 4 years old, this data. And in fact, the building that we're sitting in now, which is is it a Energy Star rated building? No?
It's not LEED.
It's not LEED?
No.
I thought they might have got some kind of anyway, they did make some effort anyway, and so that's not represented in this report, and will be in the next report.
Exactly.
We benchmark with this one.
Same with the vehicles, because they have made some changes in the fleet that will be reflected as we drill down into it.
So, well, here's the bottom line. We all agree that some level of additional detail is required. People have made some suggestions in terms of miles per gallon of vehicles, BTUs per square foot of buildings. What I'd like to be able to do is just do, 1 or 2 per section, and not try to replicate all of the different amount of data that I have, in different ways for each section. I could go on forever in the vehicle fleet, and we have a lot of data. We have how much fuel they're burning in February versus how much fuel they're burning in July. I've got a lot of data, so if we could think about it for the next
Yeah, I
couple
don't
weeks.
know,
And
right, and I don't know if we need to do sort of a month by month,
I was-
but if
yeah, I
we,
was being
yeah,
facetious,
okay,
but,
right.
yeah.
But if we're doing at least a breakdown of, so right now, the report has the emissions for the Radnor Township, and it's got, we've got gas and electricity. And so I guess for there, I would envision if we can indicate, okay, what are all the buildings that are in this block right now? And what are their greenhouse gas emissions? So as you say, we're comparing to ourselves. We're not comparing to anybody else, but then we would know that this building has, or the old building that used to sit here had X amount of greenhouse gas emissions, and the garage that's included in here had another amount. So we can
Per square
compare
foot?
them.
Per square foot, you think? Or you just want to building by building? We can talk about this later as well, but
Yeah, and I originally wasn't really thinking about the square foot thing until we talked earlier and you mentioned the size, and so I think the size is relevant. So yeah, maybe per square foot, if that's easy enough to do. Otherwise, to at least just indicate the size of the buildings, so that on a relative basis, somebody reading the report can say, okay, well, these are much bigger, but look, that building is much bigger.
okay. Okay.
Okay. That makes sense.
I'm trying to think if there's any other significant changes since the last report, and I don't believe there are. I think what's important, what's one thing that now pops out at you in this report, because I've sort of separated the school district from the Radnor Township a little bit more than I had before, and what that really brings to light is the scale of the district's buildings, for instance, compared to the township's buildings. This is our biggest building, and this is probably smaller than their smallest school, you know. Certainly in terms of carbon dioxide emissions, it is. So their data can tend to dwarf our data a bit. And if our efforts are going to focus in on our buildings maybe a little bit more than it's going to focus in on the school district, simply because they have their own budgeting, you know, and their own funding. And it is useful to see the townships separated from the school, so we can play our own little game if we need to in our own buildings, and then bring the school district in as we feel is necessary.
Yeah, and I think that in your meeting with Leo on Monday, you know, share with him a copy of the current draft and let him know that, you know, we're putting in this additional detail, but he may look at that and say, well, you know, our bar is so high because of X, Y, and Z, and I'd like to see you have this additional information in there because we're doing all of these things and it's not really reflected, or we had been doing them. It's not reflected in there, so I want to have this information. I mean,
Sure.
Obviously let him know, we had talked about this before, that we'll share a draft with him before it's finalized, because a lot of the information is school district, but even to get his input at this preliminary stage, because there may be some of this detailed level of information that he thinks is very relevant based on, you know, his intimate knowledge with all of the functioning of all of those buildings.
Yeah, the only thing is we do need to remember this is a snapshot. And so a lot of what his focus has been on is, you know, since 2005, a lot of the work that he's done to really, you know, make some major improvements in energy
Right.
conservation throughout the district.
But
So-
but if, to Brenda's point, if maybe he has been working in 2007 and 8 on a relamping project, he might want to see this broken down a little bit differently, so that when
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
2010 report or the 2015 report comes out, it'll be able to show up and highlight their efforts a little bit better. So, yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
So I think that kind of sums it up. Since I just passed this around yesterday to the members, I look forward to hearing from all of our members if they have any suggestions on better ways of breaking out the data or in more detail. We'll be adding a conclusion section to the report when we're finished. That probably will just be a summary of the executive summary. But hopefully by our next meeting, we can have another more final draft.
Okay, and to that end, perhaps what we need to do is send around another email following the email that you sent around yesterday with this, setting a deadline for comments, because as you and I know, you're more likely to get the comments in
Sure.
timely if we set a deadline. So I don't know what you think is reasonable, Robin and Sloan, give people maybe a week, 2 weeks max
Well-
to give comments on this draft.
I'm just wondering if Josh is going to be putting together some addition, I mean, would it be a good thing for
maybe,
drafting to
yeah.
move forward?
And it may be that after speaking with Leo, you may have some changes.
That's true, but I guess I don't want EAC members to just be kind of sitting back and then at the
No, I
last
think you're
minute
absolutely
providing
right.
all these comments that then
Definitely
need to,
need
yeah.
I think it should be somewhere, I think a week from when you send out, maybe Monday, you can send out anything with any school district changes or other things like that. Give people a week, I think that should be enough to comment.
You're meeting with Leo and going to circulate his information on Monday?
Well, we'll see. Well,
Or,
what,
no, I just mean
Okay.
a week
why don't we do,
before
why don't we do a
send
week?
out.
Why don't we do 2 weeks? We'll do 2 weeks from today, and I'll
Okay.
get something out. I'll get something out to everybody by email.
Okay,
Brenda,
good.
Do you think it'd be okay would you send out the Haverford version to the EAC?
I did.
Oh.
Did you see my email today? Okay, I sent an email with my comments on it and with a link to the Haverford report, which is on the web. Takes a while to load up, so
Okay.
be patient.
The other thing I just want to mention about the Haverford report is that this is more comprehensive. It's a lot fatter than ours will be in any event because it includes the community inventory. So we're not
residential.
trying to get something this fat.
Right.
Right. Okay. All right, very good. Thank you, Josh. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the rain garden project update, which Anne has been heading up, but she's not here tonight, so we don't have an update on that. So we'll look to her at the next meeting to provide us an update on that. The next work group report is stormwater program and funding. We have not had another meeting on that. I suspect that's going to be pretty quiet here through the fall and then may revive itself once things settle down a little bit in the township, but I don't imagine anything's going to be going forward on that in the near term. The next work group is the Green Building Environmental Ordinances Work Group, and I have actually just one other announcement that I wanted to make on green buildings in relation to that the Delaware Valley Green Building Council is going to be sponsoring a conference, their 2009 Green Build Conference, on October 14th to 15th in Philadelphia. I think they wanted to have something on the East Coast. The U.S. Green Building Council is having their big annual conference in Phoenix. And so this is something easier to get to, a little more accessible for people. If you're interested in that, I would suggest you take a look at the Delaware Valley Green Building Council website. And they're also having their 7th annual Green Building Celebration and Awards event on October 15th in the evening, I think probably around 5:30 or so. And that's going to be at the Penn Museum. So I would suggest you take a look at that if you have any interest in green building. And Sloan.
Really no further update. We still have a working group that has a green permitting ordinance idea that we're looking at. We had postponed our August meeting. We haven't rescheduled, but we'll work out a time to
Right.
reschedule that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The next work group is Community Environmental Education and Awareness, which is headed up by Heather Riley, and she's also not here tonight, so we don't have an update on that. But her big project was the website, making an addition to the Radnor website that was just really focused on all of the environmental issues. And hopefully we will get an update at our next meeting from her that is close to finished, because we've been working on that for a while, and I think we're getting near to the point where we can get that up live, hopefully. So then, last item is the sustainability series, and Just wanted to remind everyone that the next program in the series is Greening Your Own Home, what you as a resident can do. And we have that tentatively scheduled for Thursday, October 1st from 7 to 9. That should be here in this room. And the topics will be green remodeling, funding opportunities, Act 129 smart metering, and energy auditing. So we're still trying to nail down a few speakers on that, but that should be a good program, which is a follow-on to the alternative energy, renewable energy program that we had that was more on a national level, and people wanted to know, what they can do as residents. So we're offering that up as a follow-on to the first one.
October 1st?
October 1st, right. Okay, very good. The next item on the agenda is liaison reports, but our liaisons could not make it tonight from Planning and Health, so we'll have to wait until next meeting. From there, we go into old business. Is there any other follow-up on any old business items?
I can give you a quick update on the grant work that we were hoping to get the township involved in, some grants that were available, federal grants. The one I mentioned earlier was the Pennsylvania Conservation Works Grant. And we basically ran out of time. We weren't quite as prepared as the grant writers were hoping that the typical applicant would be. And we weren't at the stage we needed to be, so when the grant opened, we could fire up the grant work and grant paperwork and get it in. So we're going to be working over the next couple months to open a dialogue with the township in term, I guess maybe Matt Bauman and engineering or whatever. And what we're hoping to do is identify some key projects that might be applicable.
Shovel ready.
Yeah, well, to get them closer to shovel ready, and maybe identify those projects that people had on their wish lists but never could dream of getting funding for them. Bring those kind of projects out into the light a little bit. Throw some, get some pricing for them. Maybe get a little bit of design work done ahead of time so that when the next grant opens up, that's similar in nature in terms of energy savings or emissions reductions targets. We're ready to apply. And
right.
If we only have a 4-week window, which we had again this past one, we'll be able to get it done. So.
Very good. Okay. Is there any new business?
Brenda, there's the issue that was raised. Jim Riley sent us a message about an interest in having us look at fertilizer application on playing fields in the township. I'm just thinking perhaps we could ask them to come to the next meeting and just present, what their concerns are, and we can take a look at whether, this is something that.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. Probably it would be a good idea to flesh out with him beforehand whether it's concerned with fertilizers in relation to the environment or fertilizers in relation to the students. Because if it's the students, then we probably want,
The health board.
the Board of Health to be looking at that.
Well, I can explore that with him, and depending on what the answer is, steer him one way or the other.
Okay. All right. Just let me know if you
Yeah,
want
that's
to
fine.
bring him to a meeting. Okay. Okay. And I guess one thing that I had seen a news release a week or two ago that Marple Township had signed on to the EPA Water Sense program. I don't know if anybody else had seen that, but it caught my eye, and you need to make commitments to water efficiencies and education about water efficiency and things like that. So I thought it might be worth our at least looking into it. I really don't know anything about the program, and I think Marple is, the first or the only township to sign on to it, so we might want to check that out. Have you had any experience with that, Robin?
I mean, I've seen the program.
Yeah.
Haven't been directly involved at all.
Okay.
What is it? It's a water conservation effort, or?
Well,
or-
EPA has various programs targeted at issues, right? Energy Star, targeted at energy reduction. This is Water Sense, trying to get folks to make commitments to ensure that their buildings, their facilities are operating efficiently in terms of water. That you've got water efficient toilets and faucets and fountains and all those things. And I think, and I haven't looked into it, but I think that what they're asking is for folks to sign on to be a partner with EPA and to educate their stakeholders or whoever it is, whether, because it's not only municipalities, it's private entities, private firms, or organizations, and to partner with them to get the word out. And you sign on as a partner, and you have to sign a commitment letter, make certain commitments to do things, submit a report on what you've done, and so.
So this would be a commitment made by Marple Township
Right.
for the township itself.
Right.
To do certain
Right.
conservation.
Right, and to get publicity as a result of it.
Interesting.
Water efficient township, so.
Well, if it's helpful, I'd be happy to look into what that is.
That would be great. I would love that.
And
Okay.
report back on what the program is, what the
Okay.
commitment calls for.
I have a batch of materials in my briefcase, so I'll give that to
Okay.
you before you leave tonight.
Okay.
I haven't read it all, but I got it. I have been meaning to look at it, so
Okay,
thank you,
well, I'd be
Slim.
happy to look through that.
Okay, great. Very good. Okay, any other new business, or? No? Okay, so that wraps it up unless we have any public participation. Come on up. Speaking to the microphone here.
Not sure
There
which
you
one's
go.
working. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, I'm setting up a tour of the Covanta incinerator waste energy plant, and I've been speaking with a representative there, and they're telling me right now to
I'm sorry, you want to state your name, Keith? just
my
for
name
the-
is Keith
yeah.
Parsons,
Okay.
and I've been trying to set up a tour of the Covanta facility, and they were telling me at this point, anywhere between the second and third week of September might be reasonable for a group of maybe, say, about 10 people max to come and take a tour of the facility. I'm most interested concerning another project about carbon dioxide emissions and the potential of that being part of a RPS for the township, or maybe even for the state if it's not part of a state system. So
Well, and,
other people might be interested in that as well.
and this is the incineration emissions for, I was actually surprised because I thought that the trash trucks would contribute more to the overall emission, but that's, it's a lot of CO2.
It's a lot of CO2, yeah, but I'd be interested in learning a little bit about the process, and I figure maybe some other people at the township would be as well.
Can you, Keith, can you send me an email with the information, and then I can get it out to all of the other EAC members that
But-
aren't here, so that, if folks are interested in attending, we can make sure.
At this point, I
everybody's-
told them it would probably be best if we shot for an evening appointment. I'm assuming most people have a busy schedule during the day, and they told me that they would probably try and get back to me. But if people at this point want to submit maybe their open evening slots, we might be able to get back in touch with them, and between, everybody work something out.
Okay, very good, thank you. Actually, that reminds me, I think I also saw the Delaware Valley Green Building Council is hosting a tour of, is it Blue Mountain Recycling Facility that we've talked about so often here? Blue Mountain, I think it is. And they have that set up, so if anybody's interested in that, check their website. I forget when it was listed for, but I remembered seeing that. I know that was also one of the places that we've been talking about, potentially visiting, so. Okay. Okay, very good. If that's all, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second. Thank you.